Aloha, inspired moneymaker. Thanks for tuning in. If this is your first time with us, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back to Inspired Money. I'm your host, Andy Wong, otherwise known as Advisor Andy. Welcome to Inspired Money, where we explore how to make money more meaningful so you can live a richer and more happy life. Today, we're talking about the power of giving, how generosity doesn't just change the lives of others, but how it can actually transform your own financial well-being, purpose, and happiness. Research shows that acts of kindness release endorphins, lower stress, and even help us to live longer. In fact, I saw a figure that adults who volunteer just 4 hours a week can cut their risk of high blood pressure by nearly 40%. But giving isn't only about how much you donate, it's about how you give. From building a philanthropic portfolio to using tools like donor advised funds, giving can be as strategic as any investment you make. And when you align generosity with your values, you're not only funding good causes, you're creating a financial life with more purpose, peace, and meaning. So how can we give more efficiently and feel better while doing it? We're going to explore all of that with an incredible panel of experts who live and breathe this work every day. Stay tuned because today's conversation might just change the way you think about both money and giving. But first, let me take a moment to thank our sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by my investment management firm, Runnymede Capital Management, because everyone deserves a clear path to financial independence. Do you really know when you can retire or how much you'll have when you do? Most people don't, and guessing that can be risky. In just 3 minutes, you can get real answers. Go to inspiredmoney.fm/getplan, and you'll see your projected retirement age and income, plus some strategies to pay down debt, lower taxes, grow your investments, and protect your future. No sales pitch, no obligation, just clarity, the same strategies that I use with my wealth management clients every day. If you like, I'm happy to discuss things like donor advised funds or qualified charitable distributions with you. So just take 3 minutes right now, go to inspiredmoney.fm/getplan. You'll get an immediate report. And of course, I'm available if you'd like to schedule a call. Now let's bring in our guests. Our first guest is Caroline Fines, founder and director of Giving Evidence, an organization dedicated to making charitable giving more effective through data and research. She's a visiting fellow at Cambridge University and the author of It Ain't What You Give, It's the Way That You Give, often described as charmingly disruptive. Caroline has advised some of the world's leading donors, companies, and foundations on how to ensure their giving truly makes a measurable impact. Caroline, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Joining us next is Paul Shervish, Professor Emeritus of Sociology and former Director of the Center on Wealth and Philanthropy at Boston College, a Fulbright Scholar and 5-time honoree on the Nonprofit Times Power and Influence Top 50. Paul has helped shape the way that we understand giving, not only as a financial act, but as a deeply moral and spiritual one. His pioneering research has influenced both scholars and practitioners around the world. Paul, so excited to have you.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
We're also joined by Yvonne Moore, founder and managing director of Moore Philanthropy and president of Moore Impact. With more than 25 years of leadership experience across government, civil society, and philanthropy, Yvonne is a champion for equitable and cross-border giving. She helps families, individuals, and institutions create values-driven strategies that advance meaningful change in the US, Africa, and beyond. Welcome, Yvonne.
Good morning. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. And finally, we have Stephen Kump, president of DAFs at Foundation Source, where he leads innovative philanthropic solutions for donors, institutions, and workplaces, a former Bain consultant and U.S. Army officer. Stephen is also the founder of Charity Vest and chairman of Teen Advisors, combining technology and purpose to make effective giving more accessible to everyone. Stephen, you're here on short notice.
It's so great to be here. Any opportunity to talk about giving is going to be a good time. So thanks for having me.
I'm so excited about this panel that we've put together today. It's going to be an informative and fun discussion about the power of giving. Let's get right into it with segment one.
Giving shouldn't be a string of random donations. It should be a strategy. A philanthropic portfolio treats your contributions like an investment mix, aligning donations with values and maximizing long-term impact. Core holdings are your reliable, mission-aligned charities. Think consistent, multi-year support. Growth holdings are your risk-tolerant bets, smaller, innovative nonprofits where your time, funding, and skills help scale impact. Diversified holdings add flexibility, donor-advised funds for timing, or impact investments that generate both financial and social returns. Tools like donor-advised funds offer immediate tax benefits while allowing funds to grow and be deployed thoughtfully. Effective altruism and venture philanthropy introduce rigor, not just generosity, to giving. When you build a portfolio, you're not just giving, you're investing in outcomes. You shift from reactive generosity to intentional impact, turning philanthropy into a planned, measurable force for change.
Caroline, how can donors build a philanthropic portfolio grounded in measurable outcomes, not just personal values?
Well, a key thing is identifying the cause or the causes that you are most interested in. And then within that, identifying where the resources that you can bring, where and how the resources that you uniquely can bring are most valuable. So this is really an exercise in comparative advantage. You know, what have you got and where is it most valuable? So sometimes there are problems which are what I call just add money problems or just add money solutions. So there is a really good organization that's doing really good work, and basically all it needs is more money to have more people to do more of that work. Other times they might need skills or connections or sometimes encouragement, or they might need more profile, for example. And so it's important to think about what you have. Money is the most obvious thing that donors have, and that for sure is enormously valuable, particularly in the current climate. But there can be other things that donors bring as well, particularly if the donor is a company, because obviously companies have capabilities and assets which they use in their normal work for generating shareholder value, which also sometimes can be used to support the nonprofit and support its mission. I would say a key thing is to understand that we are meeting a real need, that the need is really there, and that the intended beneficiaries, the people who are affected, think that it is a real need and a priority need. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is to ensure that the proposed solution is likely to work in that place. And our organization is called Giving Evidence because our work is all about the evidence. And in both those cases, looking at need and looking at the effectiveness, it's really important to use rigorous evidence to understand those and to be sure we've got a real need and to be sure that we have an intervention that's likely to be effective.
Thank you. Paul, how does understanding the moral and emotional motivations behind giving help donors design a more intentional and values-aligned philanthropic portfolio?
First of all, if you notice in Caroline, what she said was that there's a lot of complexity that can be made understandable. Now, I want to start just with my definition of a strategy. A strategy is a way of thinking, feeling, and acting in which you accomplish or avoid certain goals simultaneously. So if you have multiple ends And if the ends are not just financial, but spiritual or moral, then the strategy is ultimately what I call a mode of engagement of self. And that is the key element of what I want to talk about just briefly, is that when you're developing a financial strategy, you're also developing a family strategy, a philanthropy strategy, a investment strategy, and none of these require that it is automatically philanthropy. People are to choose among the choices for which they are inspired at this time, at this place, with these resources. All people that are of substantial means, and really all people, have before them raised, whether they want to pursue it or not, this key spiritual question of money. How are you going to use your resources for deeper purposes when you no longer need them exclusively for your standard of living or your family's standard of living into the future? So, what are the deeper purposes for which you wish to use your wealth? That is the moral question that is before all of us, but increasingly as the world becomes more affluent and as many people become wealthy.
Yvonne, what are your thoughts? How are you helping clients navigate these thoughts and complexity?
I think, so first of all, Professor, I love engagement of self because values are actually something that we tend to lead with at More Philanthropy. And it's actually the same thing that we always want our clients to kind of pause and think about. A lot of times clients come in and they want to give, they want to do strategic philanthropy. And we're always asking them, well, talk to us about what that actually means. Are you engaging yourself? Are you engaging your family? Are you engaging your next generation? Because if it's family giving, there has to be a conversation with everyone. You want to start out the way you want to go. And if everyone is not on the same page, it can actually be frustrating down the line. And I am a firm believer of giving beyond the check. And we are working with folks who want to give. We are not working just with high net worth individuals, because philanthropy is not at all about the amount of money. And I think we probably all agree with it. It's about wanting to do in community, wanting to bring about change. And one of the first things we also talk with clients about is actually, what are your goals? What are your dreams too? Because you need to actually have an understanding. I think Caroline and the professor talked about this also. You have to understand the problem that you want to contribute to, because if you don't understand that problem well, you're not actually going to be able to help the organizations make an impact within their community. So using the check, using your influence, using your volunteer time, tapping into how the next generation can also do that work, all of the above.
Stephen, from your donor advised fund and platform experience, what tools best support this idea of creating a philanthropic portfolio?
Sure. I think the initial question that somebody needs to ask is, will I give? And how much will I give? And much of what's been discussed thus far is downstream of those questions of like, how should the money be deployed? And I think are right and worth pursuing. But to back up a step, you have this question of like, am I going to give and how much? And the beautiful aspect of a donor advised fund or a private foundation, what they can offer as a tool, is to separate the decisions of how much to give and where to give. So to separate the decisions of how much to give and where to give, and to do that in a financial account. In a very related sense, they also separate the questions of deployment of capital to charity and the tax implications of that deployment. So when you make the decision to put money aside in a donor advised fund or a private foundation, all of the tax benefits or tax considerations happen at that time. And then deploying that money out to charities as grants doesn't really need to consider that. in any meaningful way. So those decisions can be kind of clean or not have to deal with the tax code complexity. So we find that this separation is really powerful on an anecdotal level for many of our clients and donors. And there's actually been some research that has indicated the same.
Caroline, you have something to add?
Yeah, just to say, I mean, I agree with what everybody's saying. And I think you can do it. You can start with a donor's values and their ideas about what problems they want to solve, and then go look for solutions to that. I've also seen, and definitely seen this in our own work, that sometimes we know about organizations that are doing really interesting work, or we know about needs which are not being addressed and that the donor might not have thought to ask for. And so sometimes I've seen it be quite powerful, just putting ideas or opportunities or organizations in front of donors, and they can fall in love with them and see what they're doing, see how what they're doing is really powerful. So an example is a company that I worked for in the UK who wanted to do something around education/social mobility. And I found them an opportunity to fund the production of some research to evaluate a very small kind of new initiative that was an early literacy intervention. And they funded that production of that randomized control trial evaluation, and it was really effective. And then actually the government decided to scale up that intervention off the back of that research. And they even ended up in Vogue magazine, of all things. But I don't think that donor would ever have thought to ask for a research project of an early literacy program. They were just thinking about education/social mobility. And sometimes our job is to know about things that a donor might not realize are even there or are even opportunities.
Sometimes it helps to have a menu to help you decide what you want to eat, because you don't realize what the choices are.
Yeah, and sometimes there are needs which it might be very clear to people on the ground who live in a village in Uganda or who live in a refugee camp, for example, which are not obvious to donors in the first world, clearly, because we don't have those kinds of experiences. So there's a real information gap. And part of the role, I think, of a good philanthropy advisor is to help show what needs there are and what effective interventions there are. So what can be on that menu. So a donor might not intuit that, and our job is to help them kind of expand the list of options that they think about.
Exactly. Andy, you and I talked about this earlier about donor education. It's a very important piece of the work that we do. And Caroline is right. I told you this, we do not like our donors ignorant. There is no reason. We are not trying to hold you hostage as an advisor. We want you to know where to go and get the research and find out things that you want to know more about, to actually understand what it means to do change or to help make change. So it's extremely important that donors leave a donor-advisor relationship knowing how to do their own research and find things and learn about things that might be passionate for them and their family.
Thank you. Lots to digest. Let's move on to segment 2.
Giving isn't just altruistic, it's beneficial. Neuroscience shows that donating activates the brain's reward centers, creating a warm glow similar to eating, earning, or falling in love. But the benefits go beyond a mood boost. Long-term generous behavior builds a deeper sense of meaning. This is what researchers call the generosity dividend, tangible returns in both happiness and purpose. Studies link regular giving and volunteering with lower stress, better health, and longer life expectancy. The emotional returns even rival the happiness increase from doubling your income. This isn't about sacrificing for others. It's about creating a feedback loop where helping them helps you. Giving time, money, or support isn't just pro-social. It's strategic. You're not only improving lives around you, you're investing in your own well-being. Purpose isn't a luxury. It's a return, earned by generosity.
Paul, I'm sorry. I think you may have had something to add to the previous segment.
No, that's fine. I'm okay.
So I will give you the floor. I know that your research draws on Aristotle's idea of philia, or friendship love, which connects self-interest and generosity. How have you seen donors experience that connection, both in what they say and what it means in practice?
The most striking thing when I started interviews with wealth holders and when I have met and helped families is that they repeatedly told me in my early interviews that their giving did more for them than it did for the people who were the beneficiaries through the philanthropy. And at first I didn't believe that. But then I heard it again and again. And as you're supposed to do when you interview, you then start to ask follow-up questions to that very comment that they would make. And what we developed as a result of that was what we called the identification model. And later, I ran into Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. And in there, he talks about his definition of philia, which is friendship love. And this notion of philia, or friendship love, gets us a path that is not dualistic, but a path through the division between self-interest, being the explanation for all giving, or altruism, other-oriented behavior or feeling. And those two are extremes that really aren't what's going on. What's going on is what Aristotle calls philia, or friendship love. Now, that begins in the relationship between a parent and a child. I used to explain it this way when I was giving talks. I would ask people, if your little child was walking along with you next to a river and the child fell into the river, what would you do? And they immediately say, I would jump in after her or after him. And then I would say, whom are you saving? And they would say, my child. And then I would say, think more deeply. Whom are you saving? And they would say, I'm saving my child and myself. And that is the core of what people are feeling when they are generous. And what we discovered is in this identification model is that what generates generosity is the more you feel that the people you are looking to help are actually yourself, members of your family, or people like those whom you love. And we find this whenever you notice that the greatest amount of giving is to those organizations and people that are connected to you: education, healthcare, churches. Notice how close those giving behaviors are usually in memory of somebody because somebody was treated well or you were treated well. So the closer you identify or can learn to identify, the greater is your generosity. And that is the key to Aristotle's notion of friendship love, which he says is the penultimate virtue that leads to happiness. Happiness is the ultimate aim of life, and the virtue that takes you there most firmly is friendship love, which is mutual nourishment between yourself and others at the same time. It's the simultaneity of the two that is what creates that happiness. And all of us are looking for greater happiness. There's a gap between where we are and where we want to be. And the way to close or to create more happiness is to close the gap between where we are and where we want to be. And the best way of doing that is through friendship love, not only in philanthropy, but in family and in business and investments.
So philia and friendship love and generosity, they are the keys. I think that Paul just dropped the mic and left the building. Very well said. Caroline, do evidence-based givers experience the same emotional rewards as spontaneous donors?
I don't know. I don't know of any study on that. I mean, we work with evidence-based donors because people who are wanting to use evidence are the people that call us up. It's what researchers would call a selection effect. And so we only deal with people who are interested in evidence, and that's sort of by design. They definitely do feel the kind of benefits in their giving community. So that might be within the family members who are involved in the giving, which, by the way, can be massive, multi-generational. I deal with a family that's multi-generational, hundreds of millions of dollars a year, but also much smaller families giving on a much smaller, more kind of normal level. So they can build a community within the family that way. They can use it to, philanthropy can help to build a community within a company, for example. And so people experience those kinds of benefits, but they also definitely experience the warm glow. And for some people, probably kind of more so, because they know that if you base your giving on good evidence, as I say, about where a need is and what is effective, you can be really assured that you are achieving a lot, you're achieving more with your money. And so people can get more of a benefit from that because they know that the money and the resource is achieving more in the field.
Andy, I want to I guess back up and do a little bit of clarification. So evidence. So it's important to find out how people are defining evidence. Is it data? Is it qualitative or is it quantitative? Right? Because there's more than quantitative measurement, right? And when you think about impact. And so I always, and all of it actually helps gather evidence of love of humanity or actual philanthropy, which I'm so glad you brought that up, because you would not believe the number of people working in institutional philanthropy who actually don't even know the Greek Latin definition of philanthropy, which scares me to death. But yeah, so just remembering that anecdotal information in large batches actually also provides evidence of success and impact in a particular organization. I am a fan of both quantitative and qualitative. I just don't like to isolate them because sometimes people get stuck on numbers. And so what I want to know is what's behind the numbers, right? You helped 55 kids this year. How long is that going to last? How far in the future is that going to last? Is the work solid? Is it deep or is it wide? So yeah, when we talk about evidence-based and impact and evaluation, just kind of keeping all those things in mind.
The thing that I have found in our work is that what people want, no matter whether it's spontaneous or planned or asked for, what sustains the relationship comes out of what I said previously. It is not the absence of self, and it's not the presence of self. It is the connection of self. And no matter what kind of philanthropy or what kind of effectiveness is being measured, whether it's being measured or not and how, what people are striving for is connection, is this nourishment that comes from a self that is connected. So that's what really is the solution to that dualism between self-interest and altruism. It's not an altruistic self. It's not a self-interested self. It's a connected self. And whenever we find ourselves or other people experiencing that kind of a connection, that is what brings joy and satisfaction and generates purpose and action.
Stephen, what are your thoughts, especially when it comes to technology and this idea of connection? Does the tech platform help us to make those connections and democratize the whole process? Or is there a risk, as we see with social media, that people are digitally connected but actually more isolated in reality?
What a thoughtful question. Absolutely, the technology is super relevant here, and it's something that we think about all the time whenever we're designing new features and new capabilities, how this is going to affect all of the stakeholders is something we care a lot about. One of the things that principles that my company we founded, CharityVest, was founded on was believing that specifically in the donor advised fund space, there was too much friction. And here's the important part. It was affecting the relationships. So before I founded my company, I was a philanthropy advisor before I jumped into philanthropy tech. And a lot of my clients had donor advised funds, and they had mild issues with them. Now, this was back in 2014. So this is a different era of donor advised funds at that time. But many of them spotted issues, and I've noticed a pattern and noticed that only one or two providers were really supporting the technology and infrastructure behind most of the large donor advised fund sponsoring organizations, particularly the ones that weren't named Fidelity, Schwab, and Vanguard. And so felt led, convicted, believing that someone needed to start a fintech company specifically for the donor advised fund space in order to alleviate this problem, so that people like my clients and the charities that they support can have a better uninterrupted relationship where they can focus on impact and evidence and evaluating that impact, and didn't have to worry about how the dollars get from A to B. So one thing that we say all the time is we want to put a lot of focus on making the transactional frictionless so the relational can flourish.
In this next segment, we're going to talk more about DAFs and just a little background that Yvonne told me that this topic may be able to stand alone on its entire own show. But let's go to segment 3.
Giving can be both generous and financially efficient. Donor-advised funds offer immediate tax deductions while letting you invest your contribution and distribute funds over time. This separates the tax event from the giving event, creating flexibility. Donating appreciated stock allows you to avoid capital gains taxes and deduct the full market value, significantly increasing the value of your gift. For retirees, Qualified Charitable Distributions let you donate directly from your IRA, lower your taxable income, and meet required minimum distributions. Then there's bunching. Concentrate multiple years of giving into one tax year, itemize that year, and distribute gradually through a DAF. These strategies help you give more without spending more. They turn charity into a structured part of your financial plan. With the right tools, you're not just writing checks, you're optimizing for impact and outcome. Strategic generosity expands your capacity to support what matters, while improving your own long-term financial health.
Stephen, in removing some of the friction when it comes to donor advised funds or tools like Qualified Charitable Distributions, how do you see those tax smart tools empowering people to give more without feeling financial strain?
Yeah, sure. It ties back into what we were talking about earlier about separating the decision of how much to give and where to give. That is a lot of decision complexity that can be separated and processed in a parallel, way. And so we think this simplifies the decisions around giving significantly. And then, things are downstream from there. So we talked about friction already. One of the things that we find with our donors is the ability to reason about the tax implications of their giving upfront as a part of that separation of decision making being super critical. So bunching was brought up in sort of the lead-in video. Donating appreciated stock, really, really important. Another source of friction would be having to coordinate that with multiple charities, because most donors, especially on our platform, support 5 to 7 charities a year on average. They wouldn't want to give appreciated stock 5 to 7 times. They want to do that one time. And so that's a way that isn't purely technology oriented, but is structural around a donor advised fund that simplifies all of the decisions and process and workflow around, supporting their donation. And then from a behavioral science perspective, this idea of an upfront commitment is sometimes referred to as a commitment device. And so there's a lot of research around commitment devices that they do influence behavior. And there's some research that shows that it's even powerful in the giving context, that the ability to make an upfront commitment and then allocate that money later on leads to more money overall being allocated versus flipping that of you have to make commitments to many charities and let's roll that up and see how much the total is.
Yvonne, what's your experience when you work with clients to use things like donor advised funds? What are the conversations that you have, and what are some of the possible misconceptions that donors bring to the conversation?
It's so funny that you chose that question, because one of the things about DAFs that we try, I think DAF holders and folks who would like to set up a donor advised fund don't always get all of the information that they need in order to make a decision about whether a DAF is right for them. And Stephen probably talks to folks all year round about what's best for them. So that's the first thing is, what vehicle works for you. But one of the funniest things about DAFs, and not in a funny way actually, is donors have gotten much more sophisticated and savvy quicker than the institutions that hold them, and more Philanthropy actually holds DAFs on the impact side, the exempt entity side. And folks want to give internationally. Folks want to give they want to do impact investing, and the institutions are not kind of keeping up with what donors want to do. It's good to find a DAF holder that shares your values, because every DAF sponsoring organization, whether it's a fiduciary or a sponsoring organization like More Impact or Foundation Source, they need to understand, can I put my money in? Can I take my money out later? What exactly, why don't I get a tax deduction now and later, right? So there's all of these things that require education and education to the donor. But they're much happier when they understand all that they can do. They're more likely to stay with the donor advised fund and actually be an active giver. So it's really kind of understanding the vehicle that you've chosen. And to the video, you can create the DAF and you can actually create like a trust later and then actually have that money go into the DAF. And Stephen is right. It makes the giving much easier. It's not as overwhelming, but really understanding all that you can and cannot do with and in a DAF is so very important in the very beginning. And finding an institution that you really mesh with and understands what your longer term or bigger term goals are.
Paul, philosophically, can strategic generosity still be pure generosity, or does intentional design alter its moral essence?
Let me answer that with one sentence. I was trained by the Jesuits. Okay. It matters as part of your morality, as part of your spirituality, as part of your good intentions, that you actually are strategic. Being strategic doesn't take away from all of the emotional or moral issues. It actually is required by them. You must be strategic. Jules Toner, a wonderful philosopher who wrote on the experience of love, defined love as being never taking or feeling the ultimate worth of every human being and never using another human being as an inappropriate end, a means to an end. But then he says, what is love in practice? Love in practice is care, and care is meeting the true needs of others. That's where strategy comes in. The very essence of care is meeting true needs. Always worth a debate on what true needs are, but strategically, we want to have that debate, but that's always the right question. So strategy is always part of the moral dimension of all of this.
So follow your moral compass and use strategy to do it more effectively. Let's
Yes.
move on to segment 4.
Effective giving starts with informed decisions. Donor due diligence means treating your philanthropy like an investment. Begin by checking financial health. Strong charities spend at least 75% on mission-related programs, have stable or growing revenue, and avoid over-reliance on a single income source. Then examine governance. Look for an independent board, transparent leadership, and easy access to Form 990s and financial reports. Use tools like GuideStar to access raw data and Charity Navigator to gauge financial and operational accountability. But financials alone aren't enough. True due diligence focuses on impact. Seek a clear theory of change and evidence of results, metrics, third-party evaluations, or long-term outcome tracking. Avoid using the overhead ratio as your primary benchmark. A charity's effectiveness isn't defined by how little it spends, but by how well it converts resources into real-world results. When you apply this checklist, your giving becomes more than generous. It becomes deliberate, focused, and capable of driving measurable change.
Caroline, what are the most critical metrics for evaluating a charity's real-world effectiveness?
Oh, it depends what the charity is doing. It depends hugely what it's doing. So and I completely agree with what Yvonne was saying earlier, that the right research method to use, whether it's qual or quant, or what type of qual or what type of quant, depends on the research question that you have. So always you should have the right research method for the right question. We talk about a triangle of impact, and at the top, if you think of it, is charities that are serving beneficiaries very directly. So they might be, if they're working with disabled children, literally providing equipment to individual disabled children. A second level is a bit further away. This is a different theory of change that somebody mentioned. A different level is that you might work with, let's say, teachers in a school to help them understand and be better at coping with disabled children. So there, you're not working with the child, you're working with the teacher. So you're now like a level away from the child themselves. A third level is that you might work, let's say, at teacher training colleges like across the whole country. So you're now quite away from the child. But if you are, it's essentially like a trade-off of risk and return. Is that now, if you are effective, then you will have impact over more children and over more time, but there are more steps in between you and the child. So it's more likely that something will go wrong. You have basically higher risk, higher return. And then at the bottom of the triangle, you're working on systems and processes. So you might be looking for legislative change, for example, or attitude change in the community or nationally. And there again, if you're successful, you'll have even more impact, but you are further away. And it's useful to understand where a donor is comfortable on that pyramid, on that triangle, and what level of abstraction, essentially, from the intended beneficiary they are comfortable with. Those are different strategies, they're different theories of change. And the way that you measure effectiveness and the way that you assess in advance whether an organization is likely to be effective is quite different. So at the top there, where a charity is serving beneficiaries really directly, then you might use a randomized control trial, for example, because you can get a big N, a big sample size usually. But if you are at the bottom of the triangle and you're doing system change work, so if you are, for example, Sunbird AI, which is an AI for good nonprofit that's based in Uganda, and it does implementations of AI with nonprofits and government, but it also works on getting AI to be, lots of AI deployments to be like more by Africans and for Africans, and it works on AI governance. Clearly, that's very powerful and very important that AI isn't entirely driven by, white blokes in California. But that's at the bottom of the triangle. It's a system kind of intervention. And so you can't possibly put that through a randomized control trial in the same kind of way. So you need the right measures for the type of work that you are supporting. And like I say, donors vary on where they're comfortable. I've often worked with donors who over time kind of go down that level. They become more interested in system type interventions as they progress along their philanthropy journey.
Yeah, it's a process. Stephen, talk a little bit more about this idea that giving can be treated as a practice, as maybe even an art form or craft. It's something that we can get better at and improve how we do due diligence.
Yeah, I think someone could hear the question around due diligence and vetting. And while there's a ton of wisdom there that needs to be wholeheartedly embraced, and that's a field that needs to be pushed forward, I think for the common giver could internalize that and say, hey, that's not where I am. I'm not ready for that. Therefore, I'm not ready to be a giver. I'm not ready to engage in philanthropy. And I think that is absolutely the wrong answer at all. I think people need to understand that giving is a journey, that it is something that is a part of who we are. It's a practice that helps make us better and the world better around us, and we learn. I think this is a lot more intuitive on the investing side. So people celebrate, Charlie Munger or, famous investors out there who have a lot of talent and intuition that has made them who they are, but also they learned a lot over a long period of time. They didn't become some overnight success in investing. And I think that principle remains in the giving space. And so when someone asks me about good giving, I often want to learn, how much have you given already? Where are you on the giving journey, as was just brought up? Because it's a craft. Some people have called it a fitness. It's something that you learn and grow in and get better at as you figure out what breaks your heart, what fires you up in the world, and where to deploy capital that affects those things that break your heart or fires you up, and you can grow in it.
Paul, where do you fall on this? Do you think that there's such a thing as too much analysis in giving? And where do donors risk losing empathy in pursuit of perfection?
There's always a risk in any kind of giving, but I think it's up to those that are working with donors, financial advisors, the people here on our panel, to actually do something that Aristotle suggested. It's kind of a quiz that you give to yourself or others give you. If you say you're contributing money to do scientific research on a disease, what you do is help that donor self-discover about oneself. What is the ultimate end? And just as Caroline was saying, there's the triangle or concentric circles of distance from the ultimate beneficiary. You start by saying, why are you making that scientific gift? And they will say, because of so-and-so. And then you ask them again, why are you doing that? And then they'll give you an answer. And then why are you doing that? And eventually, through this biographical conversation, which is to be held, I'm sure everyone on the panel would endorse these quality biographical conversations with donors. Ultimately, the person gets to, who are the ultimate beneficiaries of this gift? Why am I doing this? How does this affect me? How are we connected? And then we're back to the most important stuff altogether, no matter what is the method of measurement, no matter how far the concentric circles are from the ultimate beneficiary. These biographical conversations bring it home.
Yvonne, how do you help donors vet organizations in regions where transparency is harder to gauge?
So actually, Professor Skavish said something earlier that is actually so key to philanthropy in general, is relationship. If you're someone in the beginning of your philanthropic journey, you have to be okay with learning about an organization. So there's lots of tech tools out there, but, and Stephen, you can tell me if I'm wrong, technology has to be used well, right? So if you're a new donor coming into this space, you're a new philanthropist, you are not going to understand a problem like the folks who are living it on a daily basis. Nor will I, and I've been doing this 26 years. You have to be in relationship with folks. You have to be willing to be in relationship with folks. If you're new in your journey, that's okay. That's what advisors are for. That's what friends are for. That's what other donors are for. So those are all folks you can talk with. Even if you don't have an advisor, you can talk with the organization. You can talk with one of their donors. You have to be in relationship if you're going to really, truly understand a problem that folks are navigating on a daily basis. Because to just use quantitative measures, again, metrics. So how much money do you spend on programs? How much money are you spending on this thing around indirect support? There's nothing indirect about a nonprofit budget. They need every single dime usually in order to do that work. So it's kind of unfair to focus on programs and not focus on how you pay the light bill or paying the people that do the work. So I just want people to be very careful. And this is what we talk with clients about. If you want to give in this area, let's do it. But we are going to have to spend some time doing a little bit of learning. Nothing overwhelming. Caroline is right. There's multiple ways to learn. You don't have to be overwhelmed. There's a New York Times article, or there's another article, like whatever newspaper you read. We share resources and data. So relationship is ultimately the way you find out. And let me tell you something, you find out everything that's going on. I have actually had grantee partners come to me and say, we are having a crisis of cash. We are having a cash flow. I have grantees come back to me and actually give me money back that the foundation gave them because they were like, you know what, we actually don't need this money. Thank you so much for being there when we really need it. So that's what I mean by relationship, because it builds trust. You learn everything that you want to learn, some stuff you don't want to learn also. So yeah, ultimately.
Caroline, I know that you have a time constraint and may need to leave soon. Did you want to share anything before you go?
Just to absolutely underline this point that you cannot tell how good a nonprofit is by looking at its overhead ratio. I wrote a book, I think you mentioned it, called It Ain't What You Give, It's the Way That You Give It. And chapter 2 is about overheads and why they are so misleading. That topic does not even fit at that flow in the book, but I was aware that there's an attrition rate of donors as they go through a book. And I just thought, if somebody picks this book up, I really, really want them to learn this point. So I'm going to put it early, even though it doesn't fit there, that a charity that is doing something that doesn't work or is harmful, which is completely possible, but is doing it efficiently, that's even worse than a charity doing something harmful that does it inefficiently, because if it's doing it inefficiently, at least it's not doing very much of it. And so what it absolutely imperative is to figure out whether the organization is delivering something that works or is likely to work. So as I say, on this triangle that I described, where you have work that is more systemic at the bottom, you're unlikely to be able to put that through a rigorous quantitative evaluation. So what you need is upfront to be able to look at it and ascertain whether it is likely to be effective. Is the need there? Does this organization have the capabilities and resources and relationships that it needs in order to deliver its thing, whatever its thing is? Is the climate right for it? So if it's trying to legislative changes that country at that time, and do you believe the theory of change? Believe that set of proposed activities is likely to to give rise to that change, the desired change. So those are the kinds of things that we look for. So because sometimes evaluation is only done after the fact, after the thing has been delivered, and that's kind of good. But you're making the investment decision or the giving decision at the beginning of your relationship with this organization. And so you need to make an assessment at that point. The other thing to say is that we often ask nonprofits to generate evaluations of themselves. which is a bit like asking them to mark their own homework, I think. And often donors and funders of all descriptions could make better use of the existing rigorous research that we already have. So look at the literature that already exists. So for example, we do work with a foundation on the uncheery topic of child abuse, and have done a lot of work bringing together all the available rigorous literature about that, so that that donor and other donors and practitioners and policymakers can find and use easily that research. And it may be that there are, in a particular question, is already answered and we don't need more research on it. We particularly don't need to ask an operational charity to do it, that we can already use research that exists. So that skill of using and finding and sometimes compiling the existing research can be really valuable.
Thank you for that. Paul, any comment? A lot of that looked like it resonated with you.
Well, I am very, very impressed with the quality of your other guests. I have learned and appreciated the wisdom that's here. There is one organization that my wife and I have made our primary charity that when we first started, we asked, it's an inner city school in Detroit, a Jesuit Catholic grade school. And we asked them, do you have any evidence of the success of your educational program? And they said, we are in the middle of doing an evaluation. And what they did is they traced their 8th graders' reading skills. And they found that their 8th graders were reading at 8th grade level. They found that they were invited or got scholarships to the best girls or boys schools, high schools, many of them the Catholic schools in the area. And then 92% of the students went to college, with another 2% going into the military. Now, that was what enabled my wife and I to settle in to support this organization. First, we supported scholarships, then we supported the STEMS program. But when they said we need money for administration, development work, and so on, do you mind if we use your yearly contribution for that? We had gotten to the point where we trusted this organization, exactly what Caroline would have pointed out. We trust this organization, and you can use the money as you need. So that is a particular story, but I think it's actually something that we've experienced about the value of evaluation when it is done well.
Thank you for sharing that personal story and clearly evidence of the importance of relationship and connection. Let's bring it home with our last segment.
Philanthropy works best when it's planned, not spontaneous. Treating charitable giving as a line item in your budget places it alongside essentials like housing or retirement savings. This reframes generosity as a long-term strategy, not a year-end afterthought. Start small, automate monthly donations, or take advantage of employer matching. As your finances grow, use tools like donor-advised funds or appreciated stock to increase impact while reducing taxes. Later in life, integrate philanthropy into your estate plan with trusts or qualified charitable distributions. A charitable legacy doesn't require extreme wealth, it requires intention. This is values-based budgeting in action, aligning your financial decisions with what matters to you most. Giving isn't separate from financial health, it can support it. When generosity is embedded in your plan, you build a financial life that delivers not just security, but significance.
Yvonne, how can families make philanthropy a shared practice across generations?
You know, I think the same way my family did. I grew up, my parents, my grandparents were all philanthropists. And so I grew up with a very clear understanding what it meant to give back of time, talent, and treasure. So volunteering, donations. They both were huge. They gave in church. They gave to their alma maters. We volunteered. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother, like I tell this story all the time. We had to get up early in the morning every Christmas because she was making meals for everyone in the neighborhood, and then we delivered them. It was not an afterthought. It was the first thought. And you notice it was right. So we didn't eat until everyone else ate. My father, very, very important that he gave back to his alma mater. My paternal grandmother, same thing. She was a professor, and she believed very much in making sure that students had not just what they got in school, but whatever else that they needed in order to get through school. So philanthropy was, and it was a lessons learned. My mother tells stories of, bad experiences on the part of the giver because they actually did not understand the problem. And so it wasn't harmful, but it was actually poor giving because they didn't understand what the challenge was. And they learned in real time what they should not do as a donor. So it was all for me. It was family. And I love that you brought this up because philanthropy is not about wealth. It's about worth and how you understand the worth of other people.
I love your family business in philanthropy.
I guess it really is, actually. Thank you for saying that. It is.
And Caroline is back. So Caroline, if someone wants to design a giving plan with measurable goals, where should they start?
Oh, I think in terms of, what they're going to give to, like I was saying earlier, is looking at where there is need and where there are effective solutions. And they should also look at what they bring. So I often think of it as being kind of these two overlapping circles of looking at, on one hand, the kind of external world. So where is their need and where is their effective solutions or solutions that are likely to succeed? And on the other hand is looking like internally at what resources, what you're passionate about, what your interests are, what's likely to sustain your interest and commitment for a long time. And that might be by geography or by sector or by growth stage. Like some people are really passionate about early stage ventures and it doesn't really matter what sector they're operating in, but also what resources you bring. And so we quite often have done exercises with donors who, as I say, can be individuals, companies, families, entities set up by government, of kind of cataloging what resources they have. And often it turns out that they have much more than they do. And strategy, like I grew up in one of the big strategy consulting houses. Strategy is about, and our friend from the military will attest to this, strategy is often about how you best configure the resources that you have against the problem that you are trying to solve. And so to look at what is the best way of using your capabilities, your assets, your money, your time, your connections, and so on against that particular problem, I would say.
Stephen, should we be applying military strategy to our giving?
We might want to put a fence around that, but I think directionally, I totally agree with where Caroline was going with that. It really is about how to make the best possible use of limited resourcing. So you've brought up not only a strategic point, but one about expediency.
Can I say also that almost always the best answer for how you deploy the money is in big dollops that are unrestricted and that are multi-year. That's almost always the best way of giving. If it's unrestricted, it means that the organization, as Paul was saying with his example, they can use it for paying their lighting bill, or they can use it, they don't have to pretend that their finance director is a project. They can just get on with actually running their work. It also enables them to respond to challenges or opportunities that come up. And I see that. I used to run a climate change charity, and one day we got invited suddenly to do something with London Fashion Week that was in 10 days time, and there was no time really to go back to the donors and ask, could we rehash what the contractual commitments on our grants were for. So it enables people to take advantage of opportunities and to respond to challenges. And if it's multi-year, then they can hire better people, because you can hire better people if you have a 5-year employment contract, than if you can only offer for a 1-year contract. And so it saves and yeah, so multi-year unrestricted money and in bigger dollops. Stephen was talking about friction, and obviously if you give in bigger dollops, then the friction is a smaller proportion, the transaction cost, and sometimes you have foreign exchange costs, will be a smaller proportion of the amount that's given. So it's more efficient in the sense that more gets through to where it's trying to go.
Yeah, so it's
I'd
similar
like to adopt dollop as a technical term in our app going forward. Just wanted to,
yeah, welcome to the UK.
Andy,
yeah,
there was something that Yvonne said that I think is very important to point out, that philanthropy need not just be formal giving into or through a 501c3. She pointed out how meals were provided to families down the street. It turns out that even looking at immigrants, remittances are approximately, and there's no way of knowing this exactly, but with more banking of immigrants and of people across the seas, we're getting a figure of about $200 billion a year remitted back to family and friends, usually who are poorer than the people that are sending the money. And not only that, but almost everybody is supporting some family member with a place to live, a car. I'm not talking about wedding or Christmas gifts, but when we did a study of everyday giving by people, we found out that this informal giving, person-to-person assistance of assets, things that is, or money, was 5 times greater than the average formal charitable gift in the nation. So the immigrants are doing a lot of this informal giving, and this is as rich of Philia and philanthropy as giving into or through formal organizations. And for some people and in some circumstances, that is the greater obligation and joy.
Paul, what does it mean spiritually to make generosity a structural part of one's life plan?
It means that they are connecting their philanthropy to their ultimate origins, to their ultimate destiny, to their ultimate connections, and to their ultimate understanding of how the universe works. And so whenever you are understanding whatever you're doing in relationship to your ultimate origins and goals and so on, that would be spiritual. If you add the dimension of bowing one's head, that is worship of some kind, then that spirituality becomes religiosity. And so you can see how many people, formally or informally, are exercising spirituality by deepening the way they think, feel, and act about their everyday activities and about their work, about their family, about their giving, about their investments.
Stephen, I want to go back to you. What's the next frontier in making generosity part of everyday financial behavior?
Yeah, I think we have the opportunity with Fintech to intertwine the opportunity to give with the means to give. That's a little bit of a philosophical point, but we want to sort of close that gap. There are many situations or circumstances out there where the answer is, not right now, or I don't really have a way to do that, or maybe next week, or I'll have my people call your people, whatever the situation may call for. But we want to close that gap to where there's no more, I don't know how to do this, to where it is here or wherever is most convenient for that donor to be able to say, yes, that is the right answer. As soon as they're clear that that is the right answer, whatever leads to that process, and even facilitating the upstream process and making that more financially integrated with the ability to give. So any complexity of what if it causes this tax problem, or what if it might affect my estate plan here or there, we want to eliminate all that and not just within my donor advised fund lane, which is my day in and day out, but a part of our broader company within private foundations and charitable gift annuities and endowments and all of the structures that help enable a yes toward loving other people, as Paul was talking about. So that was sort of a lead in, but to be very practical, I think we're about to see a transactional revolution. The ability to tap donations is going to grow pretty significantly. The ability to integrate crypto donations as an asset donation and also a means to facilitate delivery is a frontier that we're excited about. The ability to insert debit cards in situations where they've never been before, including within kind of regulated structures like some of the structures I talked about a second ago. All of that, may take some time, may still be years away, but we're talking years, not decades. And I think it will continue the march of what's possible in this space for sure.
The world is changing fast. So I think we'll leave it there. This has been an incredible conversation. One of my favorite takeaways from today is that coming into this, I think too often many of us think about giving as maybe a chore or in an activity where you're giving something away, that you're actually subtracting something, but it's not. It's actually a multiplier. When you give intentionally, you're not only changing lives, but you're enriching your own emotionally, spiritually, and even financially. So here's your Inspired Money Challenge for the week. Take one small intentional step toward generosity. It could be setting up a recurring donation to a cause that you care about, researching a charity before you give, or simply giving your time to someone who needs support. Do it with purpose and notice how it makes you feel. When we treat giving as part of our financial well-being, not separate from it, money becomes more than a means to an end. It becomes a tool for meaning. So thank you for tuning in, Inspired Moneymaker. If this episode inspired you, please share it with a friend, subscribe, and keep the generosity ripple going. Let's connect on LinkedIn. Find me by searching Advisor Andy. Inspired Money is created and produced by me and Bradley John Eaglefeather. Bradley is behind the scenes during the live stream. He edited the segments. Chad Lawrence does our graphics, animations, and editing. And last but most certainly not least, a big thank you to the generosity of our incredible guests today. Go follow their work. If you want to learn more about today's guests, Caroline Fines, you can find her at giving-evidence.com and check out her book, It Ain't What You Give, It's the Way That You Give It. Paul Shervish, explore his work at Boston College Center on Wealth and Philanthropy, where you can find decades of research on wealth and the moral meaning of giving. Yvonne Moore, please visit her at morephilanthropy.com and learn more about her work advancing equitable giving through more philanthropy and more impact. Stephen Kump, you can learn more about donor advised funds and many other resources at foundationsource.com. Does anyone have anything to plug or that you want to share?
Just don't wait to be
Thank you so
your
much for having us.
journey.
Don't wait. Start now.
Go give.
Go give. Don't wait. You don't need to wait. It doesn't have to be fancy. It has to be intentional. Just you want to do it.
So start today.
Yeah, and if you need some ideas of where to start, then you can call Yvonne or myself and we will help you.
Well said. Well, thank you, all of the panelists, for joining us today. It's been a tremendous discussion, so inspiring. And we have some great shows coming up: The Psychology of Money, Understanding the Emotions and Behaviors that Impact Financial Decisions. We also have Mastering the Art of Leadership, Financial Success and Personal Growth. We'll see which guests land where, but our next Inspired Money episode returns next week on Wednesday. That's October 22nd at 1 p.m. Eastern. I look forward to seeing you then. Until next time, do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens. Thank you, everyone.